Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Millennial Revolt, an independent political talk show that seeks to bring a different narrative than the stale one we have going on right now in the mainstream media. So, today we are going to be talking about, you guessed it, the Podesta email leaks because it is ongoing. Wikileaks is continuing to release more of John Podesta's emails, and we will be discussing it here on this channel as more and more comes out. So let's just get right into it. There is another particular email that I thought was extremely funny, given the fact that as of right now, it's basically saying and showing in the polls that Hillary Clinton is somewhere up between 6 and 15 points, depending on which poll you look at. But in battleground states, it's actually pretty tight. Now, in an email sent in the Podesta leaks that showed when she was still running against Senator Sanders in the primaries, it said, "I love Joel's idea. I also think people are readily willing to believe that this election has defied expectations in polling." So she could intro by saying, "Anyone following this election closely knows that polls can't really capture what's going on in the hearts and minds of voters." Now, if this is what the people in the Clinton campaign is saying, then that applies to what's going on in our polls right now, which shows Hillary Clinton up by 5 to 15 points, which is completely crazy. And then it goes on to say, "Yes, I like that. Tony, can your team make sure we're tracking the vote totals for us, Sanders versus Trump?" Now, anytime that you've seen a poll with Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, the polls were fairly close. Now, if you've seen when it was Trump versus Bernie Sanders blew Donald Trump out of the water 10 times over. Easy. He was either up between 11 and 15 points, even with Republicans. So Bernie Sanders actually polled extremely well as compared to Hillary Clinton, because as you see in battleground states, it's actually fairly close. She's either up by 1 point, he's up by 1 point, or she's up by 2 points. So it says, "I agree with 1 and 2, but those have been used before. They are good and we should continue to use them. But I really like believing that Joel's thing is the showstopper that makes Bernie sputter. HRC has gotten more votes than Trump. Bernie has not. It's all about the voters." And then it goes to say, "Agree. The 3 alternative ideas that Brian and I collected was she's vetted and he's not, so the polls mean nothing. The person the R's and Trump are worried about running against is her," meaning Hillary Clinton, not him, meaning Bernie. "That's why they're running ads against her. That's why they're running ads to help him." Now, the Republican primaries was over. Donald Trump was basically the nominee. So, of course, they're going to be running ads against Hillary Clinton because the Republicans want to win the White House. And the Democratic primary was still going. Bernie was still in a race for the Democratic nomination against Hillary Clinton. So, of course, he was going to be running ads against her. This wasn't a giant conspiracy. So they were saying that's why the RNC has released press statements and even tweets admitting that they are behind Bernie Sanders, because the person they don't want to run against is Hillary. Well, Hillary can't even beat an orange buffoon. So, I mean, come on. You have to have the whole media behind you basically becoming your PR firm. You can't even beat a man who's never run on anything in his life. He was on The Apprentice. I mean, this is just ridiculous. It says, "Relying on polls to show you are worthy of being president is what Trump himself does." And then it goes on to say, "I really do think Joel's ideas is very sharp. It shuts Sanders up, and in fact, it makes his line about the polls into a trap that allows HRC to talk about voters and people rallying to support her. A version of this can also be a pushback when Sanders hits her on the super delegates." So, it's just crazy. It's just completely funny how they seem to disregard the polls when Bernie Sanders was up and doing extremely well against Bernie Sanders, but Now we want to take the polls for as gold now that Hillary Clinton is supposedly 15 points up, when she was saying herself in the emails that the polls don't accurately represent the hearts and minds of voters. It just screams of the highest hypocrisy in so many forms. So there was one particular email that I found extremely disturbing, given the fact that Hillary Clinton wants to put a no-fly zone over Syria. Now, this email is between John Podesta and Hillary Clinton, what it seems like direct contact. There is no other person attached to this email. It goes on to say congrats in the subject line. And it says, I'm just going to read you a few highlights in the email, which I think are more important. It says, 2, it is important that once we engage ISIL, Daesh, ISIS, however they like to call themselves, as we have now done in a limited manner. So in the email, it's saying that the United States is not really targeting ISIS, they're only doing it a little bit. It says we and our allies should carry on until they are driven back, suffering a tangible defeat. It says anything short of this will be seen by other fighters in the region, Libya, Lebanon, and even Jordan, as an American defeat. It says, we provide advisors and planners and increase close air support to the Peshmerga forces. And it says it will give them time to restructure the Sunni resistance in Syria, moving the center of power towards moderate forces like the Free Syrian Army. And it goes on to say, at the same time, we should return to plans to provide the FSA or some other moderate groups with equipment that will allow them to deal with the weakened ISIL and step up operations against the Syrian regime. So it's all about regime change with these guys, and it said this effort should be done with a low profile and avoid the massive traditional military operations that are at best a temporary solution. Now, this is one of the most, I think, in the email, the most important part, because it says while this military and paramilitary operation is moving forward, we need to use our diplomatic and more traditional intelligence assets to bring pressure on the governments of Qatar and Saudi Arabia, which are providing clandestine financial and logistical support to ISIL and other radical Sunni groups in the region. So the United States knows that our allies, Saudi Arabia and Qatar, are arming and funding a terrorist group. A terrorist group which has killed American journalists, others. It has thrown gays off the roof. It has burned people alive. It has beheaded people. And these are our allies who we know are providing intelligence. They are arming them and they are helping them expand. You know what I mean? It's one of the craziest things as to why we have not cut Saudi Arabia off diplomatically, because everybody knows this. They keep saying, well, Iran is the terrorist state. Iran is the terrorist state. No, it's not. It's Saudi Arabia. We know it's Saudi Arabia. We know that these people arm and fund them, and we know that they're doing this in Europe, and we know that they're doing this in the US. Why we have not cut them off is all because of money, and it's all because of oil. So I think this is one of the most telling emails that there is. I think it's extremely shameful that we're going on TV trying to lie and in Red Scare saying that the Syrians and the Russians are committing war crimes when we have allies who are actively supporting and arming terrorist groups. So I think this is just one of the emails that just caught my attention. So in another email that I found, it shows, you guessed it, more media collusion. Now in this particular email, it shows that the Boston Globe was directly working with the Hillary Clinton campaign. Now in this particular email, it says, "Hi John, just wondering if we are still on for that piece. Brian said last week it was ready and just needed approval. It would be good to get it on Tuesday when she is in New Hampshire. That would give her a big presence on Tuesday with the piece and on Wednesday with the news story. Please let me know, Marjorie." So this person is Marjorie Pitchard. She's an op-ed page editor for the Boston Globe. So you have newspapers actively trying to work with Hillary Clinton and get her the nomination. So while we are talking about media collusion, we cannot forget the New York Times. Now, Vice President of Communications from the New York Times, Danielle Rhodes, went on to say in early July, after much back and forth with the campaign and reluctance on my part, I decided to take the campaign up on its offer of an off-the-record conversation with Clinton. I figured I would use the opportunity at Bretton Woods to ask Clinton directly for an interview, or at least to let me do part of the conversation on the record. She chose the latter. So, Danielle Rhodes began email communications with Communications Director Jennifer Palmieri on July 7th. She went on to say, I wanted to use this option and use the following. Obviously wouldn't use all, but a portion. These exchanges were pretty interesting. Would love the option to use. I've eaten moose too. I've had moose stew. Yeah, in Alaska, moose stew. So that's why I always got a big kick out of Sarah Palin with all of her, we're cooking up some moose stew over here. Now, Jennifer Palmieri responded, fine to use the moose stew, but appreciate leaving the mention of Sarah Palin out. For the last two questions, fine to use everything from the paragraph starting and to get serious for just a minute till the end of the interview as on the record, with the exception of the passage which I ask you leave out, and gay rights has moved much faster than women's rights or civil rights, which is an interesting phenomenon somebody in the future will have to unpack. Pleasure doing business with you. So you have basically people in the Clinton campaign taking news articles that they are being given and revising and editing things that they want to take out. So this is just more facts showing that our media is not free. Our media is completely biased in what they are doing, and our newspapers are continuing to discredit themselves more and more. So there was another email where people in the Hillary Clinton campaign made derogatory comments about Catholics. Now, this particular email was from the senior fellow of the American Progress, John Haplin, and he was talking to John Podesta and Jennifer Palmieri. He said, Ken Aluda's latest piece on Murdoch in the New Yorker starts off with the aside that both Murdoch and Robert Thompson, managing editor of the Wall Street Journal, are raising their kids Catholic. Freaking Murdoch baptized his kids in Jordan, where John the Baptist baptized Jesus. Many of the most powerful elements of the conservative movement are all Catholic, many converts from the SC and think tanks to the media and social groups. It's an amazing bastardization of the faith. They must be attracted to the systematic thought and severely backwards gender relations, and must be totally unaware of Christian democracy. Now, I don't know who they have met who are Catholics, but the people I know who are Catholics are perfectly normal. I don't see any weird gender relations, so it's very odd that you would go and attack a faith like that, doing the same thing that they criticize Republicans for doing when they attack Islam. So the email goes on to say, I imagine they think it's the most socially acceptable, politically conservative religion. Their rich friends wouldn't understand if they became evangelicals. Excellent point. They can throw around Thomistic thought and subsidiarity and sound sophisticated because no one knows what the hell they are talking about. So this is the Democratic Party just bashing a religion, the same thing that they claim that conservatives do all the time when it comes to other religions, but they're doing it privately in emails. So the Democratic Party just knows how to hide it better. So just more very shocking and disturbing emails that are coming out of the Podesta email leaks. There's another particular email that is very disturbing in its content. It's It's about what it says. Now, the email is entitled, "What's the difference between a German and a shopping cart? A shopping cart has got a mind of its own." Now, this email was on February 21st, 2016. So this is a fairly recent email. It's not old. It goes on to say, "Among the multitudes of mainstream media, falsehoods rammed down the throats of German brainwashables, the German media are arguing that the many millions of new arrivals will somehow replenish Germany's graying and shrinking labor force. Never mind that all available figures show that the vast majority of working-age Muslims in European land are not only jobless but also structurally unemployable, completely lacking in all marketable skills. The frightening future of German smedmication can be best seen in a clip giving an impression of your average Mickey Mouse vocational school, which aims to turn Muslim kids into semi-employable at the lowest possible level and fares miserably across the board." It says, to give an idea, a mind-mashing 63% of preschool immigrant children, often fourth generation in Berlin's Königsberg district, speak little or no German and are theoretically inadmissible to elementary school, disclosed Professor of Pedagogy Ali Ukar in Times Magazine. It goes on to say what makes for successful immigration. It says, "It's no brain surgery, but the media has long failed to provide a clear, credible answer. They are unable to come up with an answer or don't like the answer that's staring them in the face. The main reason behind successful immigration should be painfully obvious to even the most dim-witted of observers. Some groups of people are almost always highly successful given only half a chance." It says Jews with an asterisk next to it, Hindus, Sikhs, and Chinese people, for example, while others, Muslims, blacks, and Roma, meaning Roma Gypsy probably, for instance, fare badly almost irrespective of circumstances. So black people, Muslims, and Romas fare bad. The biggest group of humanity can be found somewhere between those two extremes, the perennial overachievers and the professional ne'er-do-wells. It says, on average, Jewish households in Britain are twice as wealthy as the rest of the country, so says Trevor Phillips, a former chairman of the Commission for Racial Equality. Britain's Hindu and Sikhs are runner-up. Well, the email goes on to say even more questionable things, where it says, contemplating the life and thought of German-speaking Jewry during the pre-Nazi era, he says, you cannot help but be struck by the unprecedented record of creative achievement by so small a group. For well over half a century, the confluence of these two intellectual traditions, the German and the Jewish, produced such an outpouring of literature, music, science, and ideas that hadn't it been for the infamous final, historians would now be writing about an Austro-German, which means Austria, Germany, Golden Age, comparable to the Italian Renaissance, the Dutch Golden Age, and the 20th century American cultural boom. It goes on to say, ironies of all ironies, the Jewish community in the Austria-Hungarian Empire and one of its successor states, Austria, accounted for almost all famous Austro-Hungarians and Austrians, Harry Houdini, and it starts to list more people. Then it goes on to say, Jews, who make up 0.2% of the global population, or about 13 million people, have produced 54% of the world's chess champions, 51% of Pulitzer Prize winners for nonfiction, 37% of all Academy Award winning film directors, 36% of Nobel economic winners, 31% of Nobel medicine winners. Then it continues to list more achievements in the email made by Jewish people. It says, by the starkest contrast, out of more than 500 Nobel laureates in the sciences, only 2 have been Muslim, named Ahmed Zeweil, apologies if I pronounced his last name wrong, in chemistry, and Abdus Salam in physics. Muslims currently represent about 1.5 billion people, or 1/5 of the global population, aka Merkel's milling masses. So there's just very questionable, very discriminating and discriminatory talk in this email, which is very disturbing, these are people coming out of the Hillary Clinton campaign, which is saying this. And it goes on to say, and the reason why I'm reading this verbatim, because I want you to understand what these people are saying. Is very disgusting, this talk. It goes on to say, in an unguarded moment, Rob Reiner of All in the Family fame once blurted out what many Jews and Gentiles secretly believe, but rarely say out loud. He said, I think Jews are the smartest people in the world, he could have added, by an eerily wide margin. Jewish stupendous superiority in so many spheres of life is one of the many PC taboos just begging to be busted. So in the email, they're saying that Jewish people are the smartest people in the world. So it is very bigoted and discriminatory talk that is coming out of Hillary Clinton's campaign. There are people in her campaign who is saying this in private emails, and that just makes me wonder what kind of person you are where you surround yourself with people who talk like this. So I just thought this was one of the most disturbing emails that I've seen. A very, very questionable email. I advise you to take a look at it yourselves. It's very shocking what's going on. So I'm the Millennial Revolt. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will keep looking through these emails. I will keep trying to show you guys what's going on so you can see for yourselves and keep yourself informed. And you have a wonderful day.